You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached. We don't impeach them. You know why? Because they're meaner than we are. We should have impeached Joe Biden for 100 different things. They are mean and smart.
Welcome back to Dr. John Podcast. This is happening right now. Donald Trump stood before House Republicans at a private retreat and told them in so many words that the only thing keeping him from being impeached again is their majority. His words were stark, his admission was raw, and his assessment was simple. If Republicans lose the House in the upcoming midterms, he said, impeachment isn't a possibility. It's a certainty, not maybe.
New reporting on what we can expect as the impeachment trial of President Trump gets underway tomorrow. Each side, we've learned, will get 24 hours, 2 days each, to make their opening arguments. Then there will be 16 hours of questions from senators who took the oath to act as impartial jurors. After all of that, they will then debate whether to hear from witnesses. Tonight, President Trump's legal team revealing how they plan to defend the president. They say, quote, the president did absolutely nothing wrong. The House managers who will make the case against the president on the Senate floor today.
Not they'll try. Will. The President of the United States acknowledging behind closed doors that the articles already sitting on the congressional record are not political theater. They are a loaded weapon waiting for the safety catch to click off. That single statement from that single source in that private setting is the most revealing piece of evidence in the entire impeachment story.
Each senator, when his or her name is called, will stand in his or her place, and they'll vote guilty or not guilty as required by Rule 23 of the Senate Rules of Impeachment. Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6 of the Constitution, regarding the vote required for conviction on impeachment, provides that, quote, no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present, close quote. The question is on the article of impeachment. Senators, how say you? Is the respondent Donald John Trump guilty or not guilty? A roll call vote is required, and the clerk will call the roll.
Because it tells us what Trump really believes about the cases stacked against him. It tells us he knows the charges are viable. It tells us he knows the legal theories hold water, and it tells us the only reason those articles haven't moved is because the Republican majority is sitting on them, not because they lack merit. This is not speculation. This is the president's own evaluation, and it changes the entire frame of what we're watching unfold. Here's what makes the stakes so immediate.
Yeas are 57. The nays are 43. 2/3 of the senators present not having voted guilty. The Senate judges that the respondent, Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the article of impeachment. Presiding officer directs judgment to be entered in accordance with the judgment of the Senate as follows. The Senate, having tried Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, upon one article of impeachment exhibited against him by the House of Representatives, and 2/3 of the senators present not having found him guilty of the charge contained therein, it is therefore ordered and adjudged that the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby acquitted of the charge in said article.
The impeachment resolutions are already written. They're already filed. They're already sitting on the congressional record, co-sponsored by more than 180 members of the House. We're talking about articles covering unauthorized military strikes against Iran, the weaponization of the Justice Department, and the president's sustained attacks on federal judges. These aren't rough drafts. They're fully formed legal documents backed by factual records assembled through oversight hearings, public testimony, and the documented pattern of conduct we've been tracking for months. The legal theories are developed. The arguments are made. The only missing ingredient is a majority willing to schedule a vote, and that majority could come down to a single election night. ABC News has been documenting what they call a rising clamor among Democratic candidates and activists. Progressive hopefuls are telling primary audiences that Trump has already crossed lines that demand impeachment. CNBC reports that candidates in competitive races are calling for immediate action over the Iran war, with one congressional hopeful saying Congress must vote on articles of impeachment immediately after the strikes. This isn't background noise. This is the base pressure that any Democratic majority would inherit the moment the election results come in. And the campaign trail commitments these candidates are making now are promises their voters will hold them to later. Let me walk you through exactly why the within hours framing is mechanically accurate rather than hyperbolic. In Trump's previous impeachments, the process required significant lead time. Articles had to be drafted, coalitions had to be built, hearings had to be conducted, legal theories had to be tested. That work took weeks, sometimes months, but this time that work is already finished. The articles are on the record. The factual foundation has been laid through oversight investigations, public disclosures, and the kind of documented conduct that doesn't require extensive new hearings to establish. A Democratic majority that takes control doesn't need to start from scratch. It needs to schedule existing articles for committee consideration and a floor vote. That scheduling decision can be executed within hours of a majority being organized. That's the mechanical reality. Not a prediction of instant action, but an acknowledgement that the procedural runway is already paved. And Trump's own "will get impeached" admission is the most authoritative confirmation that this mechanical assessment is correct. Because if the articles were easily dismissed political theater, if the charges were baseless, if the legal theories were unserious, Trump would have said that. His public posture is always witch hunt, always fabrication, always politically motivated persecution. But in that private room with his own allies, the performance dropped. The honest assessment came through. And what came through was a president who knows the case against him is real enough to produce a conviction-threatening proceeding if the political shield of the Republican majority disappears. Now let me dig into the three specific categories of articles that are already waiting in the wings because each one rests on a different factual foundation, and each one would become an immediate priority the moment the majority flips. First, the Iran war articles. These were filed by progressive members in response to unauthorized military strikes against Iran. The legal theory is straightforward. The War Powers Resolution requires presidents to obtain congressional authorization for sustained military operations. Trump conducted strikes without that authorization and without the kind of imminent threat finding that provides the legal basis for unilateral executive action. The factual record here is unusually strong, partly because of internal administration accounts. There were resignations from officials who said the war was based on no imminent threat and driven by an echo chamber of advocates pushing for conflict. There was a Senate vote where Republicans joined Democrats to block the War Powers authorization, a vote that documented the administration's refusal to seek congressional approval. Those articles are not speculative. They're built on documented actions and bipartisan concern. Second, the DOJ weaponization articles. These cover the systematic conversion of the Justice Department from a law enforcement agency into a political protection operation. The factual record here is extensive. We're talking about termination letters that explicitly said certain prosecutors couldn't be trusted to implement the president's agenda because of their role in prior investigations against him. We're talking about documented schemes that courts have ruled unlawful. We're talking about a pattern of conduct that critics from both parties have characterized as turning the nation's premier law enforcement institution into a political tool. What makes these articles particularly significant is the bipartisan dimension. There are Republicans who have joined Democrats in raising alarms about what's happened to the Justice Department, and that cross-party concern gives these articles a credibility that purely partisan resolutions would lack. Third, the attacks on judges articles. These are rooted in the president's sustained public campaign against federal judges who rule against him. The factual foundation includes specific demands for a judge's impeachment posted in all capital letters on social media. It includes accusations that Supreme Court justices are unpatriotic and disloyal. It includes a documented effort inside the Justice Department to compile what they called egregious judicial decisions across all 93 U.S. attorneys' offices, specifically to identify which judges should be referred to Congress for potential impeachment. And it includes the documented spike in threats against federal judges that has forced the judiciary to request significant increases in security funding. The Chief Justice himself issued a public rebuke, stating flatly that impeachment is not a remedy for disliking judicial decisions. That rebuke is now part of the official record of what this conduct represents constitutionally. So those are the articles: written, filed, co-sponsored, waiting. The legal theories are developed, The factual records are assembled, and the only thing standing between the current situation and an impeachment proceeding is the arithmetic of a single election. Now let's talk about the political landscape that will determine whether that arithmetic flips. The current Republican majority is 4 seats. That means Democrats need to gain 5 seats net to reach a majority with a Democrat as Speaker. In a political environment defined by low presidential approval, sustained opposition to the Iran war, economic pressures, and the broader sense of institutional crisis we've been tracking, the generic ballot is competitive. Historical patterns suggest that a president with approval ratings in the mid-30s heading into midterms is a significant drag on his party's congressional performance. And the specific competitive districts that will determine the majority are the ones both parties are pouring resources into, the ones where the margin is narrow enough that a few thousand votes in either direction decide control of the House. But the most revealing evidence about whether this flip is genuinely possible comes from Trump's own behavior. A president who was confident his party would hold the House would not sit in a closed-door retreat and tell his allies that losing the House means impeachment is certain. He would tell them that Democrats will try but fail, that the case is meritless, that the witch hunt will collapse. The fact that he used the word will rather than might is the specific word choice that tells us what he actually believes. And what he actually believes is that the articles are viable enough to produce a conviction-threatening proceeding. That assessment from the person with the strongest possible motivation to deny it is the most honest evaluation we have. Trump's "will get impeached" statement is the single most important piece of evidence about the viability of the impeachment case. It comes from the subject of the case himself. In a private setting where political performance was reduced, an honest assessment was more likely to emerge. His public posture is always witch hunt, always fabrication. His private assessment is that losing the majority means impeachment is certain. That gap between public performance and private assessment tells us everything about the actual strength of the articles waiting on the congressional record. The within hours framing is mechanically accurate because the preparatory work is already done. The articles are drafted, the legal theories are developed, the factual records are assembled, and the co-sponsor coalition is already documented at more than 180 members. What remains is the scheduling step, which is a procedural decision that can be executed within hours of a majority being organized. This is not the same situation as previous impeachments, where everything had to be built from scratch. The foundation is already there. The rising clamor among Democratic candidates and activists creates specific political pressure that would make it difficult for a Democratic majority to delay impeachment action. Candidates on the campaign trail are making commitments to primary audiences that they believe Trump has already committed impeachable offenses and that they will pursue impeachment if elected. Those commitments become promises that voters will hold them accountable for after the election. The tension between that base pressure and the strategic caution of Democratic leadership is the internal political dynamic that will determine whether the within hours scenario actually unfolds. Here's what we need to watch as the midterm cycle develops. Watch presidential approval. Whether it stabilizes or continues to decline is the most reliable predictor of his party's congressional performance. Watch the Iran war trajectory. Whether additional casualties, strategic failures, or inside resignations compound the existing opposition into an electoral liability that threatens competitive Republican seats. Watch the Justice Department accountability story. Whether the ongoing investigations produce compliance or confrontation will shape the credibility crisis through the remainder of the cycle. And watch the specific competitive seat dynamics, the candidate recruitment, the fundraising, the local issues in the districts that determine the majority are the granular variables that will ultimately decide whether the 4-seat margin flips. Here's the bottom line. Donald Trump told House Republicans at a closed-door retreat that if they lose the House, he will be impeached. Not might, will. Multiple impeachment resolutions are already drafted, already filed, already co-sponsored by more than 180 members, covering the Iran war, the weaponization of the Justice Department, and his attacks on federal judges. Those articles are waiting on the congressional record for a majority to schedule them. ABC News and CNBC have documented the rising clamor among Democratic candidates and activists who are telling voters they believe impeachment is warranted and that they will act if elected. Legal analysis confirms that a Democratic majority could move the existing articles from committee to floor vote within days, possibly hours, because the preparatory work is already complete. Trump is racing around the country, holding rallies in competitive districts, making fundraising calls for vulnerable members, intervening in specific races because he understands that his political survival depends on maintaining that 4-seat majority. The countdown is real. The articles are written, the legal theories are developed, the co-sponsors are documented, and the only thing standing between the current rhetorical standoff and the within hours procedural reality is one election night. Stay tuned. The midterm cycle is accelerating, the political environment is shifting, and we are going to be right here covering every single development as it unfolds. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Does the House flip? And does the within hours impeachment scenario become reality? I want to hear from you. I'll see you in the next one.